Unqualified amateurs have taken over news reporting. The rise of the internet has allowed self-proclaimed independent journalists, bought and paid for by megacorporations, to spew propaganda and lies. In a world where the vast majority of Gen Z gets their news from social media, truth, ethics, and objectivity have been disregarded by unscrupulous actors who want to line their own pockets. I'm Robert Tolpe, an unqualified amateur, and today I'm talking about people like me who claim to be journalists when they most certainly aren't. In recent weeks, a video released by the infamous fast fashion retailer Shein caused a firestorm of controversy. It featured a small group of influencers who were flown out to China to tour a Shein factory. They spewed corporate talking points defending the company, my favorite of which being a comment made by one influencer who implied that Shein's factory isn't a sweatshop because the workers weren't sweating.
And honestly, everybody was just working like normal, like chill, sitting down. They weren't even sweating. We were the ones sweating.
Reports from credible news organizations reveal that conditions in the factory featured in that video are not representative of where most of the clothes sold by Shein are made. Many outlets have claimed that it's not uncommon for Shein clothing to be made in dingy and cramped workshops in sweltering heat, in what are literally quintessential sweatshops, by workers paid as little as 4 cents per item. Of course, these reports are from the corrupt mainstream media, and why should we take their word for it when self-proclaimed investigative journalists like Danny Carbonari present us with evidence to the contrary?
And Shein is just such a developed and complex company, and it was so beautiful to see firsthand. I was able to interview a woman that worked in the fabric cutting department, and you guys know me, she's an investigative journalist. So I asked her all of our questions.
They're not even sweating, guys, see? All jokes aside, the Shein situation illustrates the problems with independent journalists, with the main one being that any unqualified layperson can call themselves a journalist. You don't have to have any sort of credentials to do so. Miss Carbonari has a bachelor's in communications, and that's about it. She's never worked with any major news organization, and she has no documented experience in the field of journalism. While formal experience isn't everything, and you can be competent without working for the mainstream media, Ms. Carbonari's actions show the problems with having no proper training. She firstly does not abide by any known code of ethical conduct. Real journalists follow strict rules about accepting paid-for trips and tours from large corporations. Assuming they don't decline offers from brands like Shein to tour factories, they fully disclose who's paying their tab and do their best to maintain a semblance of neutrality and objectivity, even if it's not in their best interest. Ms. Carbonari and her peers, on the other hand, accepted this deal from Shein with open arms, and though the video alludes to Western narratives about fast fashion being untrue, Carbonari does not address the widely documented specific cases of Shein using sweatshop labor and exploiting their workers, which would be vital if she was attempting to provide a balanced investigative report about the company's working conditions. This is not, of course, what she's doing. She's simply saying what she thinks the company who paid for her plane ticket wants to hear. Who is paying their bills is an important question to ask when consuming content from self-proclaimed independent journalists. In a world where AdSense dollars don't cut it anymore, and print and local journalism are dying a slow and painful death, it's increasingly harder to make a living as a freelance journalist or content creator, which is why I'm plugging my new $5 category on Patreon, where you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server. I'll be personally hosting a discussion about this video in the general chat, so don't miss it. The link to my Patreon is below. Oh, and I also have a $1 category if you just want to give a token of support. To provide another example of what I was saying, the plight of Johnny Harris illustrates the problems with trying to make a living while not being employed by a major news organization. Unlike many other independent journalists, Johnny Harris does have traditional journalism experience. Say what you want to say about Vox, but he worked for them for years and has a master's degree in international relations. Although he may have some credentials, it's debatable whether he has any scruples. Johnny has come under fire recently for casually making a video in collaboration with the World Economic Forum, a massive lobbying organization for billionaires and megacorporations. Lovely. His video, How China Became So Powerful, has been criticized by many YouTubers as being a work of pure propaganda, yet Johnny Harris is still loved and trusted by many. Side note, this man became a mouthpiece for elite billionaires, and the internet doesn't bat an eye. But when this woman who is self-described as plus-sized becomes a shill, she is ripped to shreds. There's definitely a double standard there. Anyways, independent journalists far removed from the extensive resources and armies of fact-checkers at large news organizations often get the details catastrophically wrong. The small size of their teams is another reason why the vilified mainstream media is able to produce journalism that is superior in quality. To use Johnny Harris as an example again, his videos have been criticized by experts as sometimes being misleading or outright incorrect. But those are mistakes, not outright intentional falsehoods. But intentional falsehoods are hardly unheard of in the independent journalism space. Some independent journalists on TikTok have their platform open and available to the highest bidder. They will literally say whatever they're paid to say. Take Dylan Page, aka News Daddy, who claims to be the most followed news account on TikTok, and with 8.8 million followers, that might be true, but that's where truth ends on his page. He reports on what's making headlines in a given week, but alongside news reporting, he engages in highly questionable and, although I'm not a lawyer or a legal expert, possibly illegal and fraudulent behavior. On June 20th, he posted a video framed as a legitimate news story about the publicly traded company Graphics Group, claiming that secret negotiations in the US government would make the stock explode.
Here's why secret negotiations between two Democrat senators caused this small company to explode into one of the biggest in its industry.
And indeed it did. The stock shot up 25% in the 2 days after that video was posted, before plummeting afterwards. It wasn't a news story, of course, it was a paid partnership with who knows what entity. That's not disclosed, only that he was paid to say what he said. Though I'm not a financial expert, it's possible that this was a pump and dump scheme, in my subjective opinion. The value of the stock appears to have been artificially inflated through partnerships with influencers organized by someone with a vested interest in raising the value of that stock. Once little kids and gullible adults with Robinhood accounts listened to News Daddy and bought shares in the stock, anyone who owned a lot of that stock likely made a great deal of cash. If they sold their shares when the value was at its peak, they made a killing on the market. And the easily manipulated and likely young people who trusted in News Daddy and bought the shares of the stock lost all their money. News Daddy's behavior is so morally questionable that it possibly constitutes securities fraud. And I encourage you to submit a formal tip, as I have done, reporting a pump and dump scheme to the United States Securities and Exchange Commission below. Link the TikTok and explain the details of the situation. It takes less than 10 minutes. As I've established, the world of independent journalism on social media is fraught with controversy and corruption. But can you ever responsibly consume content made by independent journalists? Of course you can, but do so with caution. On a personal note, I get a lot of my news from Lisa Remillard on TikTok, and I've had very few qualms with how she reports the news. She knows what she's doing and has been reporting the news on TV since I was pooping in diapers. Though she has all the degrees and traditional broadcast news experience, I don't take her word for granted, and I get my news from multiple different sources. That is the best way to fend off bias and corruption in the news. If one news organization is doing something shady, you best believe other news organizations are going to expose them for it or report the same story honestly. Always double check the stories you hear and keep in mind an entity's motivation for publishing them. Anyways, I'm Robert Tolpe, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to check out my new Patreon category. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I hope you have a great week. Bye-bye.